Okay, so these here are QCY's newly released MeloBud N70s, successor to the crazy popular MeloBud Pros. Let's see how they do. First up, unboxing. QCY haven't done anything too crazy. You've got the earbuds themselves, your quick start guide, one of those tiny USB A to C cables, and 5 different silicone tip sizes to choose from. You also have 3 colors, Midnight Black, the one we have here, Starlight Purple, and a Titanium Gold, which I quite like. Okay, let's talk build quality and design. QCY aren't trying to redesign the wheel here, and for the most part, they're pretty similar to the MeloBud Pros and AirPod Pros, that kind of design. The earbuds are all plastic with a glossy finish on the stalk, which houses your touch controls around the top. They are a bit slippery in hand, but they're also lightweight and easy enough to take in and out of your ears. The touch controls do work well. I didn't have any issues with my inputs not working, and they are customizable in the app. In terms of build quality, some might say they feel a little cheap, as you can see and feel the seams, but this isn't really a deal breaker considering the price tag. The N70s are also IPX5 rated, so you won't have a problem working out in these either. Now, fit and feel is of course subjective, but for myself, they sit quite nicely. They're slightly less bulky than the AirPod Pros, and don't sit quite as deep as IEMs, so you want to play around with the different sized ear tips to get the best seal. So let's talk the charging case. It's okay. It's the same plastic as used on the earbuds, which means it's very slippery, so you need to be careful handling these. But otherwise, you have wireless charging, which is awesome, an LED indicator, USB-C charging, and a really solid hinge. There's absolutely no play at all, and it feels very sturdy, even more so than my AirPod Pro 2s, so I won't have any worries about it breaking anytime soon. More on the battery in a bit. Something to note is that both the case and earbuds themselves pick up fingerprints and oils pretty easily, so just make sure you're keeping them clean over time. Okay, so let's talk about the sound quality. Chris and I are pretty picky when it comes to it, so we had our expectations tempered knowing the price tag and the target market of the N70s. Put shortly, they don't sound too bad. The overall tuning is fun and energetic. There's a punchy low end and plenty of mid-bass rumble, and the MEMS tweeter adds quite a bit of sparkle up top, which for some might come across as a little sibilant. I did notice some distortion in the treble, especially on things like cymbals, where that detail gets a bit crushed and loses clarity. With the stock tuning, the lower mids also get a little overshadowed, so you miss out on some of that warmth and detail. That said, I do like how the bass is handled, having a nice round and full punch without being too boomy, sitting nicely in the mix and not overdoing itself even in drum heavy songs. Plus, having that extra low end is a nice touch when out and about, as it helps to drown out the outside noises just a little bit more. Soundstage is nothing too special, despite the advertised 40 kHz treble, as they're rather intimate sounding and there's not a lot of instrument separation, so they won't sound as open as higher end gear. But overall, it's still pretty comparable with the other wireless buds we use, like the AirPods Pro and Galaxy Buds. Now, something strange I noticed was with the in-ear detection sensor. It can get a bit confused at times. On occasion, it'll keep playing even if I've taken an earbud out, and then pause once I put it back in, which is the exact opposite of what you'd expect. Another small thing I noticed is when you resume playback with the touch controls. The audio kind of muffles for a split second as the volume fades back in. It's only something you notice if you really listen out for it, but definitely something to note. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the sound of these. ANC is one of the bigger selling points for the MeloBuds, with QCY claiming up to 56 decibels of noise cancellation. Now, I'd have to assume they mean a peak rather than average attenuation of 56 dB, probably somewhere in the bass region. For context, my AirPod Pro 2s, which are some of the best in the business, have been third-party tested as an average of 27 dB across the spectrum. In reality, numbers are one thing and actual performance is another, so let's see how they really do. The N70s have good ANC performance. We've compared them to a number of different earphones and headphones, including the MeloBud Pros, AirPod Pro 2s, Galaxy Bud 2 Pros, Powerbeats 2, and Sony XM4 headphones, and the N70s are a surprisingly decent performer. Compared to my AirPods, the N70s still let through a little bit of the mid and lower frequencies, such as chatter and ambient hums, sounds that my AirPods block out completely. On the bus though, with music going, the N70s block out pretty much everything bar some low engine hum. I also noticed the suction feeling you sometimes get with ANC isn't too strong here, which does make it a little more comfortable to wear for longer periods of time, even if it doesn't feel quite as isolating as something like my AirPods. In the app, you do get a bunch of different ANC presets depending on your environment, but to be honest, I couldn't really tell a huge difference between them. I mostly left it on adaptive mode, mainly because it's kinda a hassle changing modes as you walk around, and it worked well enough. But, of course, if you do want to dial in just how much filtering you're getting, the option is there. Another thing I liked was that switching modes didn't seem to affect sound quality either, normally a hallmark of cheaper ANC earbuds like these. The transparency mode here is pretty solid for the price. It doesn't let the full frequency range through, but voices in particular come across clearly when using the special vocal enhancement option in the app, which seems to filter out some of the lows so that speech cuts through better. It's definitely usable, but does sound a bit artificial overall. Okay, Chris here to talk about battery life, which is actually one of the N70's strongest talking points. On a single charge, you can expect up to 10 hours of continuous playback, with the case providing an additional 50 hours with ANC off, or 35 hours with ANC on. Plus, they have fast charging too. QCY claims just 10 minutes of charge nets you 2 hours of playback, and in testing, that's pretty close to what we found. In real world use, I was easily getting through an entire week and a bit. The dual connection mode works well too. Once you've enabled it in the app, you're good to go. I paired them with my phone and laptop, and once connected, switching between the two was basically seamless with little to no lag. Stuff like jumping from a YouTube video on the laptop to Spotify on the phone just worked without any fiddling. No complaints here. As for the microphone quality, which uses a triple microphone array and some AI algorithm processing, it sounds okay. In a busy environment, it may not do too well. Now, the app support is actually pretty good. The QCY app allows for quite a bit of customization with the N70s, allowing you to change or fiddle around with pretty much whatever you'd want. But there is one gripe I have with the app, and that's the EQ. It's weird. The presets work as expected, but it gets complicated if you want to set up your own custom EQ. For starters, it looks like this. When you tried leveling out everything to 0 gain for blank slate, you would expect a neutral sound signature, or as close to one as possible. But it just makes the N70s sound awful. It's kinda hard to describe. I spent a good 20 minutes trying to EQ a neutral sound, but it wasn't easy. The EQ just doesn't behave the way you'd expect. But luckily, I did have some surprisingly good results with QCY's Hear X EQ automatic tuning thing. It's one of the app features which is meant to personalize a curve to individual hearing sensitivity. It ran a 5-minute hearing test in both ears and then applied a custom EQ profile based on the results. And for me, the EQ curve it generated actually sounded better than the default tuning. It helped lift that recessed mid-range and brought the vocals forward in the mix. I do suspect this feature will be either hit or miss depending on the listener and how well the test is run, but a cool feature nonetheless. Okay, let's compare the N70s to the MeloBud Pros. Honestly, there aren't too many differences here, but the differences that are present are certainly big ones. Firstly, the build and design are practically the same. The case and earbuds are ever so slightly different, with maybe the N70s having a slightly sturdier hinge. They both sit in my ear the same, so if you had issues with fit on the Pros, you will have issues here too. And how about sound and ANC? The N70s sound much better. They immediately sound much more detailed with that brighter tuning, staging is quite a bit wider, and the bass has been reined in to a much more appropriate amount, whilst still being a very fun listen. The ANC on the N70s is also better. There's less of that whooshing kind of sound, and it blocks out more of the higher frequencies than the Pros. Same story with the transparency mode, where the N70s sound less artificial and less in more of the low end than the Pros. There is also quite the bump in battery life. We're talking a 16-hour increase in overall playback time, which is awesome. Bluetooth 6 versus 5.3, both have 6 onboard mics, and both have the same gaming and dual connection modes. In terms of pricing, you can find the MeloBud Pros right now for just $50 Australian, which is going to be roughly half that of the N70s at launch. We would recommend saving up for the N70s if you can. The increased battery life, sound quality, and ANC are worth it in our opinion. Back to Justin. So, where does this all leave the MeloBud N70s? Well, in a sentence, they're just a more refined version of the MeloBud Pros. Now, these are priced at $60 US, which I think is slightly more than the Pros at launch, but it's hard to argue with the value. You're getting solid build and comfort, wireless charging, a massive battery, and a feature-packed app with plenty of settings to play around with. ANC performance with these cheaper buds haven't gotten quite as good as the more expensive ones like my AirPod Pros, and the N70s are no exception. That said, ANC and transparency performance still isn't terrible by any means and won't be a letdown. Some users may find the treble region a bit hot, and if you're purely after a hi-fi experience, consider something like the Moondrop Space Travels instead. If you're just after a really good all-rounder, then the N70s are your best bet. The MeloBud N70s will be available to purchase from the 26th of August on Amazon and the official QCY website. Big thanks to QCY for sending out this unit for review, and if you found this video helpful, check out the DRN article linked below. That'll be it, thanks for watching.